by the Drayton family today. We are currently in the 12th generation of Drayton who own this property. They were able to remain in possession of the property through 2 wars that would make their way onto our grounds. Both the American Revolution and the American Civil War would both have troops come to the property. The 4 cabins we're going to visit today, they are 4 but remain of 11. These 11 cabins were originally built in 1850. While they were built in 1850, they were lived into up until 1991. The 4 cabins has been restored and preserved at different periods of time. One to 1850, this is a slave era cabin. One to 1865 to 1877, this is to represent Reconstruction. One to 1920 to 30 to represent segregation, and one to 1959 to represent civil rights. We're going to talk about 6 things over at the cabins. We're going to talk about the transatlantic slave trade, the triangle trade, the Drayton family, rice cultivation, a law passed in 1787 that will stop the importation of slaves into the United States, and then we're going to go in detail about each of the 4 cabins. So Magnolia was a working rice plantation. However, 1865, Civil War ends, slavery is abolished, and we stopped growing rice. That is because rice, unlike cotton or tobacco, it cannot be sharecropped. Rice is a very heavy, labor-intensive crop to grow, well beyond the means of a single family. So we stopped growing rice, and in 1870, just 5 years after the war ended, Magnolia opened as a public garden and has been open as a public garden ever since. The topic of slavery is expansive, and in the roughly 45 minutes we're going to spend together, we will barely begin to scratch the surface. If I talk about something, or if I don't talk about something you'd like to know more about, feel free to ask questions. Questions are always welcome. When we get off the train, we're going to go down this paved road right here on our left. We're going to go all the way down this paved road to that white tent, and we're going to get comfortable under that white tent. This cabin closest to us, the small one, it was built in 1900 for UAE. It's a smokehouse, it's locked, never looked at my slaves, it's storage today. If you exit to your right, watch for oncoming.
This is the little one built in 1900 that's a smokehouse.
States, but especially slavery here in the South, people will oftentimes try to justify or rationalize slavery by saying, well, there was slavery in Africa. The kind of slavery that's practiced in Africa and the kind that's practiced here in the New World are not the same thing. In Africa, there are different forms practiced. Debt slavery, what we often refer to as indentured servitude. Military slavery, young boys taken and forced to fight in the army. But the most common form of slavery practiced in Africa at this time, war captives, prisoners of war. 2 people fight each other, someone loses, losers are enslaved. In this kind of slavery, which is the most common, if you're a woman and during your enslavement you have a child, your child is born free. You're also going to be enslaved about 7 years. In the New World, we practice a form of slavery called chattel slavery. It is lifelong, multi-generational slavery. You'll be a slave for life, your children's children will be a slave for life, so on and so forth. No kind of slavery is good. Chattel slavery is by far one of the worst kinds. It is invented for the purpose of servitude in the New World. It starts with the Portuguese. So the Portuguese are one of the biggest navies in the world, but at this point in time they are the global leaders in trade. Luxury items are in high demand in Europe, and they come from North Africa. The Portuguese decide they're going to cut out the middleman, cut out the caravan routes for these luxury trades. They're going to sail down and get these items themselves to make more money this way. So they sail down to the west coast of Africa. And they're trading for these luxury items, things like ivory, exotic feathers, jewelry boxes, and gold. They're trading for these items, and these tribal leaders, these kings, these chiefs that they're trading with, offer to sell the Portuguese their prisoners. And the Portuguese accept. Europe at this time has a massive labor shortage. About 70 years prior to this, the bubonic plague hit Europe, killed about 25 million people. So these first enslaved Africans go to Europe, and they fill the labor void that the plague had created. In Europe, they're enslaved 6 to 7 years. And then in 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. We discover the New World. A lot of land, a lot of resources discovered by accident. We were trying to find Asia, and instead we find all of this. Land and resources that once they found, they wanted. To extort the resources, they implement chattel slavery. 12 million enslaved Africans come to the New World. 20 to 25 million leave Africa. 8 to 13 million people die before they get here on what we call the middle passage. They're kept in the holds of these ships. 150 to 300 people on board each boat, chained together, stacked on top of each other. Living in their own dirt, their own feces, they're barely fed. They don't know what's waiting for them when that ship lands, but they got a good idea that it's not good. Many will choose to commit suicide before they get here. They'll stop eating and they'll jump overboard. Jumping overboard is typically an attempt to get the captain off the ship, If you managed to get him off, you would save everyone else on board. But the majority of those that do not make it here alive, they are thrown overboard. Ships are powered by Mother Nature. If the wind doesn't blow, the ship won't move. We call it being dead in the water, because you'll die. First thing that'll likely kill you, you'll run out of provisions. To make sure your crew survived the journey, you fed them the food rations you set aside for the enslaved on that ship. Those enslaved whose food was taken from them, they threw them overboard. Of the 8 to 13 million people that do not make it here alive, the majority of which are thrown alive into the Atlantic Ocean. It is a 3 to 4 week journey to South America. If you're being sent to what is now the United States, you're going to be on that boat for 4 months. They say you could smell a slave ship before you could see it. South America does take the majority of the enslaved. About 8 million people will be sent to South America. Of that 8 million, 5 million alone will go to Brazil. If you're sent to Brazil, from the time you land to the time you die, 45 days. The West Indies will take about 3.5 million. What is now the United States, about 500,000. In 1860, though, there's somewhere between 4 and 5 million enslaved Africans in the United States. That 500,000 grows because people have children, and in many cases, they're forced to have children. So the drains are English, and originally they don't come to what is now the United States. They go to the West Indies. They go to the West Indies, to Barbados, to cash in on sugarcane. Sugarcane makes 3 things. It makes sugar, molasses, and rum. They're growing sugarcane and they send it to Europe. In Europe, they exchange it for money and for weapons and ammunition. This is taken to Africa, exchange for people sold into slavery in the New World. We call this the triangle trade. Weapons and ammunition. It is really easy to win a fight when you have a gun and the people you're fighting have never seen guns before. They give these tribal leaders and chiefs these weapons so that when they go out to fight their neighbors, it is really easy to win a fight, because when you've never seen a gun and someone starts shooting at you, you're going to lay your bow and arrow down. This means they will surrender, which means less casualties. Less casualties means more captives. Captives are turned around and sold as slaves to the Europeans. Of all the enslaved brought into the United States will come through the port of Charleston. Next 2 big enslaved ports, Virginia and Rhode Island. They'll both take about 150,000 enslaved each. Drains are here, and they decide we're going to grow sugarcane, crop that was making them rich in Barbados. Contrary to how you will feel visiting South Carolina, it is too cold to grow sugar here. We're too far north, it's not hot enough. Only places in the United States that you can really grow sugar, very bottom of Louisiana, southernmost tip of Florida. Year-round, median temperature necessary to grow sugar, about 105 degrees. It is not that hot here. So they tried to grow sugar, and it failed. For 23 years, they tried to grow different crops, and for 23 years, everything they tried failed. Too cold for sugar, so they tried to cultivate silk. It's too hot for that. The worms died. So they tried olives. It rains too much. It's too wet. Then they tried ginger, and that failed. And they tried citrus fruit, and that failed. So they decided to raise cattle. Free-range cattle, because it's super, super, super hard to mess up free-range cattle. You let the animals go, and you leave them alone. So there's no money in it. It is extremely expensive to send a boat to Europe, and meat isn't worth enough money. You're not going to get enough of it on the boat to make any money sending it to Europe. At the most, they're going to send this meat to the other colonies and into the West Indies. It does not require a lot of enslaved labor to raise cattle. It does to grow sugar. They began to sell the enslaved that they brought with them from Barbados in order to make up for loss of income that raising cattle does not bring in. It is these enslaved that are getting sold, that want to stay with their families, that say, we can grow rice here. Rice is not native to the Western Hemisphere. It is, however, native to Africa. They've been growing rice there for about 2,000 years at this point. The topography of West Africa and the topography here are very similar, what we refer to as the low country, marshy, swampy, humid, spongy soil, and it rains a lot. The conditions that rice thrives in. So they're going to give rice a shot, and it works. But rice, like any other crop, before you can grow it, you have to prepare the land. It'll take them 20 years to prepare the land to grow rice here. 2,000 acres is a lot of trees. Ditches and canals will be dug, levees and dikes built. In order to grow rice, you have to flood the fields. To flood the fields, you have to dig down. They will dig out 1,000 cubic pounds of dirt an acre by hand. No chainsaws, no ditch diggers. It's backhoes, hand shovels, hand saws. 20 years of hard labor, and then you can grow the rice. Rice, however, is the deadliest crop we will grow in the United States. Even today, it is extremely dangerous to grow rice. Because it grows to about 4.5 feet tall, and all the rice is at the very top of the plant. You have to flood the fields or the rice will rot. When you flood the fields, you have to use fresh water. Salt not only will destroy the rice, it will destroy the land for about a decade. Fresh water. Ashley River is not fresh water, it is brackish. So in order to flood the fields, you have to stagnate the water. Stagnated water is an invitation for pestilence, mainly mosquitoes. They carry malaria and yellow fever. Standing bodies of water in the southeast. Alligators, copperheads, cottonmouths, rattlesnakes, water moccasins, leeches, snapping turtles. All of these animals will kill you. Stagnated water also has really high levels of bacteria because it doesn't move. There's no current running through it. Very easy to cut yourself. You're in this water all day, every day. That bacteria can get into your bloodstream. There's no medication, and even if there was, they're not giving it to their enslaved. For every 100 people enslaved on a Charleston rice plantation, 46 of them will not see 20. 42 more will die before 50. Of the roughly 12 that are left, only one is going to live to see 70. The death rates are astronomically high. Once you grow the rice, you drain the fields, you cut the plant down, you lay it out to dry in the sun, then you pick it up, you put it in buggies, and you beat the stalk of the plant. And this is what falls off of it. This is what rice looks like when you harvest it. White rice is encased in a brown branded husk. That's why we call it Carolina gold. It looks gold in the field. You cannot ship this. The branded husk absorbs moisture and the rice will rot. You have to take it off. To do this, they use a tool native to West Africa. You've all probably seen one called a mortar and pestle. There's little bowls with sticks in them. However, the one they use is about as tall as I am, and it's carved out of a Virginia live oak tree. They're very big and they're very heavy. You put the rice in the mortar and you beat it with a pestle. The beating, twisting motion, it debrands and dehusks the rice. This is a woman's job because you break less rice than the men do. Women break about 30%, men break about 50%. You cannot sell broken rice. So it's the women's job. Once you've debrained and dehusked it, you then have to separate it. To this, you use another tool native to West Africa called a willowing basket. It's a big, flat, circle sweetgrass basket. Put the mixture in the middle, and you shake it, and you throw it up in the air. Brain and husk, float away in the breeze, catch the rice in the basket. 3 bowls of this will take you 8 hours to dehusk. Wow. We will produce 1,500 pounds an acre, 1,900 acres. That's about 2.8 million pounds of rice. It will sell somewhere between 3 and 5 cents a pound. So we're going to go in the middle and say 4 cents. 2.8 million pounds of rice sold at 4 cents a pound. They will be making about $114,000 off of a yield of rice. In 1860, $114,000. Today, about $3.8 million. Making about $4 million off of a yield of rice here. 80% of the consumed rice in the world at this time will come from the Carolinas, about 100 million pounds a year. Biggest buyer, Napoleon. That's what he feeds to his army, the guys by the shipload. Growing the rice, the conditions are deadly, the work is hard, and these plantation owners are getting very wealthy. And then in 1787, we're in Philadelphia for a constitutional convention. The first constitution of the United States needed some help. So they're in Philadelphia, and they're rewriting the Constitution. Slave owners demand 20 years to import slaves into the United States without limitation, and they're given their 20 years. 1807, that 20 years is up. 1808, it's ratified by every state. In 1808, it is officially illegal to import people into the United States for the purpose of servitude. You can no longer import enslaved from Africa anymore, so your enslaved have to live longer, and they have to have children. Here at Magnolia, before 1808, we had 13 huts. These 13 huts were in the big grass field across the street. I'll point it out on our way back. Dirt floors, adobe and thatch style buildings. Those walls will fall down though, and those floors will turn into mud because it rains here a lot. You're going to be in the mud, you're going to be wet, and you're going to be exposed to the elements, cold, influenza, pneumonia, running rampant. So after 1808, we moved to structures with raised floors. Raised floors, you're no longer sleeping in the mud. If you're not sleeping in the mud, you're less likely to get sick and stay sick, and if you're not sleeping in the mud, you'll have more children. Children are the next generation of enslaved. You can no longer get enslaved from Africa anymore, so your enslaved have to be making the next generation. Labor system also changes. We go from the gang style to the task system. They can't work you as hard because they need you to live longer. Gang style, everyone wakes up in the morning, goes out into the fields, you work at least until dark, most of the time into the night. 7 days a week, 364 days a year. Christmas is the only day you do not work. You are essentially worked to death. After 1808, move to the task system. On a plantation, including this one, you have a slave driver. This is a term we've all heard before. There's a very negative connotation when we say the word slave driver. What we think of when we say slave driver, that very negative connotation, that is not the slave driver, that is the overseer. The overseer is the white man on the property who does not own the property. He's typically paid based off commission of how much rice or whatever crop you're growing is produced. They are notoriously very cruel. A slave driver is an enslaved African. The overseer is the person that decides who gets punished. He makes the slave driver punish those who decide should be punished. The slave driver is also the person that gives you a task in the morning. He assigns your task. It's based off your age, your gender, and your ability to work. It's about 8 to 9 hours. But if you can get that task done in 2 hours, or if it takes you 20, it doesn't matter. When you're done with your assigned task, you're done and you're out of the fields. You don't have to wait on everyone. You can fish. You can grow gardens. You can trap animals. Trapping, not hunting. Hunting requires a gun. It's what you can do with your bare hands. But more food means you're going to live longer because you're going to be healthier. But most importantly, this is the time you get to teach your children trades: ironworking, blacksmithing, carpentry, masonry, the skills that built this country. Skills that, for the most part, come to this country via the enslaved. You teach your children these skills because they are significantly less likely to be sold if they know how to do one of these things, because you can hire out slave labor. These cabins that were built in 1850, they were built not only by enslaved labor off this property, but hired out enslaved labor. Enslaved were brought here. They built these cabins, and when they were done, they were given back to their owners, and their owners were paid for the work that they did. So you teach your children these skills in hopes that if their owner goes to sell someone, it's not going to be your child. So after 1808, your living conditions are better, you're not getting sick as often, you're having more children, you're not being worked as hard, you're going to live longer, have more food, more time to feed your family. None of these things are done out of the goodness or kindness of anyone's heart. The only reason these things change is economics. They need you to live longer, and they need you to have kids. It's the only reason things change. So these 4 cabins are what's left of the 11 that were built here in 1850. While they were built in 1850, they were lived into up until 1991. They would have started in the field across the street where the original 13 were and expanded in a straight line all the way over to here, which is often referred to as the Slave Street. About 12 years ago, we moved them all to one area, so they're not in chronological order because some are in their original locations. We only have 4 left: hurricanes, fires, and in 1880, running along the fireplace to divide it into 2 units. 4 to 6 people on each side, 46 people enslaved here altogether in 1850. Take the word family with a grain of salt. You had no say in who you married, and as a girl, you got married as soon as you were physically able to have a child, so that's around 11, 12 years old. Left side's fully restored. Fireplace in the middle used for heating only. It's too hot here and too big of a fire hazard to cook inside. Even with all the modern cooking utensils like pot-bellied stoves and things like this, the fire hazard is still too high to cook inside. So left side, there's whitewash on the wall. Back then, it's a mixture of phosphate and oyster shells, and it keeps mosquitoes away. We don't use this anymore because phosphate is super explosive. But it does a very good job of keeping the bugs away. Half loft's where your kids sleep. Not enough room for 6 people to sleep on the ground. Also, you have a toddler. You put them up there because for them to get out of bed, they literally have to fall on you. These doors wouldn't lock, and there were animals out here that will eat a toddler. Cougars, 400-pound hogs, things like that. So, safest way, put your child up there so you'll wake up if they get out of bed, and they can't get out of the cabin without you knowing. So that is how they all would have looked in 1850. The very last cabin, the other one with the wooden roof, 1865 to 1877, reconstruction. 1 family per cabin. That partition now is a doorway cut out. 65% of the enslaved chose to stay here when the war was over, about 25, 26 people. Starting in 1870, they're paid in cash by the hour. For that first 5 years, Reverend Drayton was broke. 1 person in your family worked in the gardens in exchange for free housing. In 1870, when the gardens opened, he began paying in cash by the hour, and housing remained free. Even today, for the few employees that live out here, their housing remains free. So that's how they all looked in 1850. 1865 to 1877. So during those 12 years, we're under martial law. The Union is here in Charleston. They're providing a blanket of protection. Black men can vote, and they can hold political office. 1875, a very important Civil Rights Act is passed. The Civil Rights Act of 1875 says that African Americans shall be treated equally, fairly, and justly under the eyes of the law. Then we vote for a new president. They want Rutherford B. Hayes to become president, but he's a Republican, and the Southerners won't vote for him. To get the Southerners to vote for him, they come up with what we call the Compromise of 1877. If you vote for Rutherford B. Hayes, we'll pull the Union troops out of the South. Rutherford B. Hayes becomes the 19th president, and they will order the Union troops out of the South. Ordering the Union troops out of the South allowed Southern Democrats, those old Confederates, to get back in positions of political power. They will repeal that Civil Rights Act in 1883. Repealing this specific Civil Rights Act is what laid the legal groundwork for segregation, Jim Crow laws, and black codes. During those 12 years, there is a lot of progress. And as these 12 years come to an end, a lot of regression backwards. But with progress comes resistance. Tennessee, 1866. The KKK is founded. 1870, they will be in every single southern state. In South Carolina, not only do we have the KKK, we have the red shirts. The red shirts are formed out of the belief that the KKK was not violent enough. The red shirts are not around today. The KKK very much so is. Second cabin, 1920s and 30s, segregation. We would not have had a tin roof on the cabin in the 20s and 30s. September 1989, Charleston will be hit with Hurricane Hugo. Hurricane Hugo will destroy many cabins here and taking the roofs off of these two, which is why the tin roof is put on because of Hugo. It was a massive, massive hurricane, category 4, borderline category 5. But during the 1920s and 30s, it was cold. My version of cold, not yours. I've never seen snow. But the ceiling's been lowered. There's 2 layers of wood and newspapers on the wall. This is insulation. There's also a potbelly stove. Potbelly stove, you can cook anything on a potbelly stove. The fire hazard, time to go home by loosening the ropes on their bed. Very last cabin is Mr. Johnny's, 1969. That's when he will move out. So Mr. Johnny is the oldest son of Willie Leach. He's our first salaried black superintendent. Mr. Johnny will go on to proudly serve this country in World War II. He was a combat engineer in the Philippines. He was home to Charleston in 1943 and he wants to work for the post office. But the only job they'll give him is painting mailboxes. So he says no thank you and he comes out here to work for his dad. In 46, he will become our superintendent and will be assigned this cabin. He'll hold that position for 70 years. Takes the fireplace out, turns 2 rooms into 3, and has 13 feet to the left because he needs the space. Mr. Johnny will raise 13 of his 18 children in that cabin. I like to say the only thing in my mind that can make having 18 children any worse. 15 boys, 3 girls. He's married and widowed 3 times. He will raise the children those wives have after they pass. He will go on to raise 25 children altogether. In 1969, he moves out of this cabin, moves into a house the Drains had built for him on the property. When he moved out, the Smith family moved in. They lived here till 1991. Mr. Johnny worked out here till he was 91. He passed away a year ago this past July at the age of 93. Picture Mr. Johnny in this cabin with his grandson and 2 sons. Those 2 sons and grandsons still work out here full time today. Artifacts in this cabin dug up in the field across the street about a decade ago. In the very first cabin, there's mortar and pestle. It is an original. It's about 350 years old. You can pick it up. You can take photos with it. You're going to pick it up. You're going to say it's not that heavy. It is still heavy enough to break a toe should you drop the pestle on your feet, so be careful. No electricity until the 1940s and 50s. About 10 years after, the big house gets it. No running water until 1971. No indoor plumbing until 1975. Mr. Johnny lives here. There's no water or plumbing, which is why his cabin has a back door. The outhouses were located behind his cabin. So you can go through the cabins on your own. You can go through with me. I can answer any questions you might have. We just need to be back on the train by like 12:15. So you got about 15,